on Grow Big TV. And here's Joe and Corky.
How you doing, Corky? How you doing? How's everything?
Good. Thank you, Vineyard Chicks, for doing that song for us. I really appreciate it. It was really great.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome.
It was awesome.
So, yeah, I can't believe the Vineyard Chicks did that for us. That was so special when we just do it on a fly like that.
And super original. So thank you so much.
And he sounded so awesome too. So that was awesome. That was great. So we got a great interview today. I can't believe this is happening. Mycolove Farms, talking mushrooms. I mean, I never seen too many channels talk about mushrooms at all.
Yeah, so, it's because a lot of people don't know what they're talking about either. So they stay away from the subject altogether.
And a lot of people think it's psychedelic.
Yeah,
or
they don't.
Like,
yeah. So
you know what? When you're afraid to pick something, you're afraid to eat it.
Right.
And it's the same thing about taking it from any kind of shelf. Well, we're going to learn a lot about mushrooms today. And we have Shane and Michael in our basement, so we're going to welcome them on right now. Here is Shane, and this is Michael. Or kind of flip like that, but welcome, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. So talk a little bit how you guys form your company.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely, I just want to, thank you guys for bringing us on and letting us do our wrap here. And you're 100% right on your intro there, that a lot of people just don't know a lot about mushrooms at the end of the day. And that's, a lot of what we do on a day-to-day is education. At the end of the day, that's what we do. So my name's Shane. I am CEO and co-founder, and I got Michael here, which is also a co-founder of Mycolove Farms. So I guess the elevator pitch here is, we wanted to, but Michael and I both have experience in the mushroom industry for many years. And we both had our respective kind of fields of what we did. And I'll let Michael talk about his, I'll kind of go into mine, and we can talk about how they kind of came together to create this entity of what we call Mycolove Farm. So my background is in ecology and evolutionary biology. And I didn't learn a thing about mycology during my undergrad, surprisingly. But, my job set me up, and you guys are really, obviously, professional gardeners here. I got my background in soil science right out of college. I worked for, of all things, I didn't realize this was a field, but working in soil science for cannabis cultivation. So in Oregon, there was a big push around 2016 for, more and more closed loop agronomy, if you will. So I was very fortunate to be into a new field where people were very interested in sort of the evolution of soil science. And then through probiotic farming techniques, I learned a lot about soil. In a healthy teaspoon of soil, I don't have to, preach to the choir here, you can have over 1 billion microorganisms in there. There's a lot going on, a lot of diversity, a lot of biodiversity. And one big realm of that is the fungal queendom. That was sort of my introduction into the fungal realm. And then throughout my experience in my undergrad, very interested in this, sustainability aspect. Conservation biology was sort of my concentration. And I was really bombarded by all of these, anybody in the environmental science, is sort of hit with the deluge of the things that we're doing to our planet at the end of the day. And unfortunately, after 4 years of this, you can become very jaded and kind of worn out. Because I think one of the big issues I had with this was, hey, great, I'm learning about all the challenges and all of the damage and destruction that we're creating for our planet, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation around, well, what can we do about it? And that, for me, was sort of this existential crisis. And I did a lot of searching to try to figure out what can I do as a singular entity to make the biggest impact on what I could do. And I kept coming back to this idea of biodiversity. So in ecosystem health or ecology, this word biodiversity, I don't know if I needed to define it really, but generally it's just the measure of different diverse genetics in an ecosystem. So like a cornfield, a monoculture, a monocrop would be very not diverse. You have all of the same genetics. They're all clones of each other. That's why you have to apply chemical pesticides, herbicides, synthetic inputs, all of these things to try to cater to this dominator society at this, I tell you when to drink, I tell you what to eat, I tell you how to protect yourself. And when you go into a more diverse ecosystem, so like a forest system where there's a lot of different species, a lot of different plants, that's a higher biodiversity. And crudely put it, just a blanket statement, the more diverse species you have in an ecosystem, the better off it is at the end of the day. So that, all of these things were kind of floating in the ether for me. And what really helped me, kind of hit it home was this world of the fungal queendom, and realizing that, with this realm of species, you have this ability to approach almost anything with food, medicine, technology, whatever you really need. And it can create what's called a circular economy. So where you don't have these overflow of wastes, you can kind of redirect wastes in one way and grow mushrooms on them, or you could, your mushrooms that you produce can be compost or fertilizer for another system. It's this circular economy, this closed loop system. And all of these things sort of were floating the ether for me. And I think one experience I had that really hit it home for mushrooms for me, the last one, was supplements. So I am really interested in this idea of conscious consumer. I'm a conscious consumer. I really love, biohacking my chemistry to be a more elevated individual. So whether that's, exercise, fitness, my immune system health, or my big passion was nootropics. So this idea that I could change the chemistry of my brain to better, learn more complex, topics, or figure out more complex puzzles. This idea is pretty amazing to me. And when you dig into more natural versions of these neurostimulators or cognitive support agents, you find the most potent version of this, the most natural version, is lion's mane. And then you find that you can buy these, mushrooms, you can consume them. And if you read the label, this was about 10 years ago, you do a little bit of digging, you realize that there's not a whole lot of quality control on that label. There doesn't really tell you, where it was grown, how it was grown. Is it the actual part of the organism? If you're going to eat an apple from an apple tree, you don't eat the bark. All of these things kind of led to improperly prepared products that were just, inadequate for my experience. And again, all of these things kind of accumulated for me in this idea of, well, how do I use the world of fungi and approach that to my community? And that was sort of my introduction into the mushroom space and why I was propelled into the space. And I'll kick it over to Michael to see how he got into the space, and we'll connect those.
So thanks for having us, everybody. It's nice to be on your show.
Thanks for being on.
So I have been in the food industry for a really long time, and I started noticing there's a whole big thread of why I'm here and why I'm doing this. But what I noticed, or what sticks out in my memory about why I ended up where I am right now, little vignettes of time where I just remember looking back, like at my restaurant in like 2004, 2005. I remember I grew up in the Midwest, and I just remember chefs coming into our restaurant in the springtime with these big bags of mushrooms that they had foraged along the Missouri River and the Platte River. And I was intrigued. I grew up thrift shopping, antique stores. I grew up hunting with my dad. Like, I've always been sort of a treasure hunter, I should say. And the idea of fellas going out into the woods and harvesting all of these gourmet culinary mushrooms and then bringing them, like, essentially they were getting paid to go hiking in nature. And that to me was like a pretty cool idea. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was introduced to foraging through a friend. I went out with him and was immediately hooked. I then, a few years later, sort of moved to Colorado, and I was still interested in the subject, but it was a totally new environment. I was living in the plains of Nebraska and moved to the mountains of Colorado. So I didn't know what I was doing. So I joined the Colorado Mycological Society. After joining the Mycological Society, I sort of just fell deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, mostly on the foraging side, mostly on the wild culinaries. And I had done some growing over the years. I think I uncovered a picture of a reishi or a shiitake, I can't remember, from 2014. And I did a little stint at a lab in Carson City, Nevada, to sort of like hone my growing skills. and because I knew living in Colorado, you couldn't forage year round. So I had to figure out, well, I guess maybe I could grow mushrooms, and so it started getting me interested in that. Ultimately, I started a company, a foraging and education company in Colorado, where I take groups of people up into the mountains and show them what they can and can't consume. Usually I end those little hikes with experience of just cooking up the mushrooms that we found that day, put them over some toast and enjoy it. And it's just the most wonderful time. Again, I couldn't do that year round. And I was sort of venturing out and trying to figure out where I could put myself. And I ended up doing a consulting thing for a friend. That was like the last thing that was on my calendar for 2021. And then I got a message from another friend who's in the food world, and she told me her friend Jake was starting a farm, a mushroom farm specifically, and if I was interested in talking with him. And since I didn't really have any plans except maybe start a e-commerce site, or I had already quit my full-time job to do the mushroom thing full-time, and so I ended up taking a meeting with this guy Jake, and we hit it off. That's where I met Shane, and then I guess Shane can take over from here. That's sort of a condensed version of my story, but essentially I just was intrigued by mushrooms, by the kingdom or queendom of fungi, and I just kept kind of following it where it took me. And so now, here we are today, farming.
So tell everybody about there's 4 co-owners, founders total, and you guys are in Colorado. So tell us a little more about everybody's relationship. Like Michael just said how he got Jake. That's who you're talking about, Michael, Jake.
Yeah.
And just tell how everybody formed a little more of those. I totally forgot the other
Leo
co-founder's name. So just how did everybody get linked all of a sudden?
For sure. Yeah. So again, Michael's experience and then my experience having these kind of respective pathways into the mushroom realm, having separate sort of mushroom companies. I had a prior company as well, kind of doing, focused on the mission of what I was just kind of doing my wrap on a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And Jake, the way I think about Jake is in soil science, there is a realm of species of fungi called Mycolove. And the Mycolove produce these they're called glomules, I think. And it's sort of like the glue that sort of holds soil together. And that's how I think about Jake. I think he's sort of like the glue in the part that kind of brought all of us together. And that's literally what he did. So Jake himself, being, in the athletic world, had a lot of, trauma to his body, not only, physical trauma, but psychological trauma that he, those professional athletes, they go through hell and back. And by the time that they sort of retire, they're given a prognosis by medical professionals that says, hey, your body's just going to start falling apart. Good luck. Bye. And Jake, in this world of biohacking, was like, hey, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to focus on my lifestyle choices as well as my diet and let food be thy medicine. And he got really passionate and he found functional mushrooms. And just to do a quick definition, we talk about our world as functional versus medicinal, because when we say the word medicinal mushrooms, we get lumped into the psilocybin or psychedelic world. Not a problem with that at all. It's just that we aren't focused on psychedelic containing or psilocybin containing mushrooms. We're focused on these other medicinal mushrooms that have clinical research behind them that are not psychedelic. So we call those functional mushrooms. And Jake found functional mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, and turkey tail to be revolutionary for his path forward. And he, through a friend of a friend, this property was purchased in the countryside of Colorado, about 45 minutes east of Boulder, in a little unknown quiet town called Fort Lupton. But a friend of a friend bought this property, and on the property was a mushroom building. So the previous owner had, built this facility, literally a fully functional mushroom farm, turnkey. They had, closed their business down. They had sold the property, and this new property owner's like, I don't know what to do with this mushroom farm on the property. And luckily, the friend of a friend knew Jake was interested in mushrooms. So he had Jake come out to the farm and check it out. Jake was super moved and really saw this potential, this opportunity to get into the mushroom space by, getting his hands dirty by growing these mushrooms. However, Jake, will tell you he was not an expert in mushroom cultivation. So he reached out to he reached his mycelial threads out to his community, where a friend of his reached out to Michael because they heard Michael's in the industry, and a different friend reached out to me because they met me through a farmer's market. And he brought us out there to see if we could help him figure out how to grow mushrooms. And through that sort of initial interaction, we kind of took it upon ourselves to, hey, how do we come together as this group, and how do we, heal through biodiversity in very simplistic terms. And that's basically how we all kind of came together. And Leo, Michael and I didn't know each other, even though the mushroom community is pretty small. Leo had a cultivation experience as well, and he had met Jake randomly through another person. And Jake kind of brought us all together, and we kind of went with it. We're just like, okay, let's grow mushrooms. How do we heal the world, basically?
Now, do you guys watch football too?
I am not a sports ball person per se.
How about you, Michael? Do you watch football?
I watch Super Bowls or bowl games but I'm not really I don't follow it.
That's great. I really wanted to know that because I want to know it's the guy thing,
Yeah.
Your team got killed today, stuff like that. That's great.
I have a little anecdote here. What was fascinating to me is I had no idea who Jake was at the end of the day. and me and him had met up a couple times, grabbing coffee, grabbing lunch. And then I had in passing, they're like, hey, what are you doing recently? I'm like, oh yeah, I met this cool dude. His name's Jake. And they're like, I mentioned his last name. I think Jake Plummer. And they're like, the Jake Plummer. And then I Googled it and I was like, highlight reels. I was like, what? And then I was just like, oh my gosh, I've been, Jake is such a down to earth individual. You wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know because he's not one to, self-proclaim himself like that necessarily when you meet him.
I'm totally
like you. I would never know the difference between any celebrity or anything like that. So.
I'll be afraid if I'm in a room. Hey, throw that to me. Also throw. Oh, you got quite an arm there. Courtney.
Well, okay. So I just had a couple questions, and so I think it was the resheet. No, it was turkey tail. A while back, my dad had cancer. This was 9 years ago, going on 10 years ago. And I did a ton of research on the reishi mushroom because my dad at that time had liver cancer, and it was supposed to be really good for that. And you guys have a lot of tinctures. So what is the difference between, why did you go with no alcohol for the tinctures, and how do you preserve those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we could talk a little bit about the functional mushrooms as well, and why we kind of chose these, because you have a really good anecdote. And I'll kind of start it with this sort of factoid to wrap our heads around. So, we all hear about the leading causes of death in the U.S., right? There's the first, the second, the third. The fourth leading cause of death has an interesting topic, right? So if you were to sum up all of the deaths that occurred because of this topic over the past 2 decades, it would be the fourth leading cause of death. And this topic, what causes this death, is taking prescription medications as prescribed by your physician. Which is sort of mind-bending. So, we are a culture that sort of, in a way, without intention or lack thereof intention, a couple different things can occur. The growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. And then this lack of intention could be sort of this damaging ethos to ourselves. And then we in turn are damaging ourselves, and as well as damaging our entire ecosystem. And what's fascinating is that there are this realm of fungi that have been clinically researched for many years. I believe there's been over 630 species of functional mushrooms that have been researched in clinical research trials, whether that's in vitro and vivo, so on petri dishes or in animal models as well as human So that's a big number. 630 of these have been researched so far. Of these, there's about 130 different functions of which they have been measured to approach the human body or animal body in general. So there's, an estimated 3 million unique species of fungi on the planet. Not all of them produce mushrooms, necessarily the fruit-bearing organism, but there's a lot of unknowns in this world, and they're called nutraceuticals. They're a very natural, complex, multifaceted product that can be consumed by the everyday person that can have really amazing therapeutic gains on individuals. And then, that's just getting us into why functional mushrooms in general, right? They have these amazing therapeutic processes that they can be applied to any one individual. Each mushroom does many complex things. So if you went into all the details of just reishi, like you mentioned, you could result in analysis paralysis because you're learning all of these amazing things and this wide net that's cast by each mushroom, which is really complex, but amazing at what these things can do. And what we decided to do was focus on probably the most published mushrooms. So reishi is literally the most published clinical research mushroom that's out there currently. Next up, you have something like lion's mane. Then you have cordyceps and turkey tail. So we focus on those 4 mushrooms to begin with because they're probably the most researched mushrooms, but they're also probably the most well-known mushrooms. So that's why we're not boxing ourselves into only those 4 mushrooms, but we decided to work with those 4 mushrooms at this point in time.
I was gonna say, why not shiitake?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's millions of potential options to grow. I mean, not really. There's probably, again, like even out of the number of 600 different species you can grow, there's not a whole lot of research on each one of these mushrooms. And though shiitake does have a ton of research, there's a lot of shiitake farms, right? We wanted to be a little bit more, creative in what we offered to this realm. So why extract the mushroom? So that's another question, because I just mentioned you can eat shiitake, right? So why would we focus on extracts to begin with? Well, so why do you cook mushrooms? That's a good question too. The worst way to consume a mushroom for therapeutic value is raw, uncooked raw mushrooms. And why this is because all the mushrooms that we're talking about, all the ones we listed and all the ones that you could find in the wild are made, the cell walls are made of the same material. So this material is called chitin. So chitin is the same thing that crustaceans are made of. So crabs are made of chitin. That's their outer shell. And then insects, their exoskeleton is made of this material called chitin. So chitin it's called a biopolymer. It's a very hardy, dense, structurally sound material. You can think of it like nature's plastic. And I don't know if you know anything about trying to digest plastic, but you can't. So chitin is considered an insoluble material by the human gut. So the human body doesn't really know what to do with this material. It passes it as insoluble fiber. So the challenge here is that the goods like this clinical research that's been conducted are on the constituents or the compounds found within the mushrooms. These compounds are generally interwoven and locked into the chitin. So if you're consuming underprepared or incorrectly prepared mushrooms, you're not getting anything therapeutically out of them except for insoluble fiber. You're just literally flushing your money down the toilet because it's just passing
It's
through.
so funny that it has to be cooked before consuming. It's better that way because most herbs, if you cook them, then you lose all properties.
And then that's another important aspect. So why don't you just cook the mushrooms? Why would you even extract it? Well, in extractions, if the company and the people doing this sort of research in functional mushroom preparations are doing it correctly, they're paying attention to all of these different things kind of floating in the way. So temperature is a big part of that. That's why you wouldn't just normally, if you want there's a scale of getting the most therapeutic bang for your buck. The worst is raw, uncooked. When you start entering cooked mushrooms, that's great. There's tons of meta-analyses and research publications on generally just asking the question, how is it beneficial for health if you consume mushrooms? And if you don't care about the species, how it's prepared, whatever, they're just cooking and eating mushrooms. There's tons of good data on just getting mushrooms into your life. But if you're looking for better therapeutic gains and more effective therapeutic gains, then you want to get into more dialed in specialized extractions because they're paying attention to temperature, they're paying attention to solvent, they're paying attention to all of the factors that could degrade or break down compounds. And that's where, Mycolove kind of comes into the extraction space. We wanted to prepare the mushroom to get you the highest quality therapeutic product that we can get you. And that's by paying attention to all of these complex factors when preparing a mushroom. So extractions are super important. So that's why you would even extract a mushroom. And why we would offer liquid extractions. There's a couple reasons for this. So when you perform an extraction, you use a liquid it's your solvent, if you will. Once you conduct your extraction, you're left with the liquid. So normally people might try to get a capsule or something like that. That's an extra step. So you have to prepare the liquid by removing the liquid. And there isn't a whole lot of research on the efficacy of using the processes that they do use. They usually use immense amounts of heat to produce a powder. And we wanted to be a little more sustainable. Less steps is more sustainability in our case. So we were like, why don't we just offer the liquid pre-powder as a product? And those are called tinctures. So we want to be, we're the farm. So if I point, this is backwards for me, but if I point to Michael, if they're looking at the screen like it is now, hopefully this is Michael or Michael somewhere. Maybe he's over there. I don't know. So Michael really heads up all of the cultivation. He is the farm guru. He kind of tackles all of that stuff. I'm more focused right now on extraction sides. But yeah, sorry, I'm going down these rabbit holes, and I think I lost the original question.
You're great.
Okay, I was curious as why you didn't use alcohol.
Oh yeah, or glycerin. Why we use glycerin? Yeah. So either way, so when we want to be as organic as possible, and I was getting to that is the farm has a USDA organic certification, but the lab also has USDA certification, and we want to be sustainable. We want to be as clean as we can. So the only solvents that come in contact or that we use at the lab for extractions are water. Water is an amazing solvent at the end of the day, and organic cane ethanol. These are the only two solvents we use. We do use any sort of poisonous or dangerous solvents to extract our mushrooms. So if we do our extraction using these two bases or these two solvents, we want to offer that product as well. So that original flagship products were alcohol-based tinctures. So we use the alcohol and water to extract it, and then we leave it in that form and sell that as a tincture. So it's got an alcohol base. So that was right off the table. We're offering this product. It's pretty well known, but in the herbalism world, these alcohol-based tinctures, it's a pretty normal product, everyday product for people to take. But not a normal everyday product for everybody else on the planet, because alcohol can be very polarizing. It depends on the individual. Maybe they don't want alcohol for health reasons. Maybe they want to offer this product to kids. Maybe they're pregnant. Maybe they're in recovery, X, Y, and Z. There's reasons why you don't want to consume alcohol, whatever that reason, that's fine. So we wanted to offer a product that didn't, have that barrier to purchase. We wanted to offer a product to anybody, and alcohol was a reason they didn't buy it. Okay, how do we offer a product that's not alcohol? So we still do the same extraction using the same solvents, but then we use science and chemistry in our lab to remove all of the alcohol out, and then we add glycerin in as just a stabilizing agent. So glycerin
lasts as long as alcohol?
No, definitely not as long as alcohol, but it's also a really great shelf stability agent and a great sort of emulsification agent. So it's really good at just holding things in sort of its matrix. So glycerin is interesting. And why I was kind of really excited about glycerin is because it's very sustainable. It's a plant-powered product. So plants create glycerin on their own naturally through fermentation processes. But we can create this artificially by taking plants that are high in fats and oils. We can prepare them using certain techniques, and then it turns the fat or oil, like coconut oil, if you will. If you prepare it a certain way, it could break it down into 3 parts. So you can break it down into water, more oil, and glycerol. So glycerol is it just comes from plant oil basically, and it's 60% the sweetness of sugar. But it's not a sugar, which is really cool. It's got sweetness to it, but it's not classified as a sugar. It doesn't pop up on the glycemic index, none of that kind of stuff. And it's very sustainable. We get ours 100% organic, sourced from U.S. Supplier, which is really good. They create the stuff in-house in the U.S. And it turns out it's also a really good shelf-stable product. So if we remove alcohol and we add glycerin in, we can at least get a somewhat comparable shelf-stable product, maybe not. Alcohol can last for more than 2 years, it turns out. Yeah. But who knows what's happening to the constituents over that long period of time anyway. So glycerin, generally the mix that we use can last up to 12 months, so 1 year. So we just recommend that any glycerin product you would want to take, any product you'd probably take within a year anyway. So a year is a pretty good shelf life.
But our recommended, just our recommended dosing basically requires you would never have it on a shelf for more than a month or two, because, one of our bottles is 30 mils and that's a full month's supply. We've condensed the therapeutic dose into 1 mil and it's, sort of noted on the dropper. So, I mean, unless you wanted to buy a bulk and surplus, you wouldn't really worry about the shelf life because you'll be going through it ideally.
Now, do you take it on empty stomach?
Well, yeah, I was going to get into this too, because a lot of questions usually pop up as we just kind of went into that we probably should cover, right? So if we talk about each mushroom, which we can go into, but if we put our blinders on and just give each mushroom a theme, so lion's mane being cognitive or neuronal support, there's tons of really good data on that, memory recall, that sort of stuff. You have reishi, which has tons of data. We consider it sort of when in doubt, reishi. So if you don't know what mushroom to take, we recommend just go with reishi because it's a great preventative maintenance. You pay the reishi doctor at the end of the year for not getting sick, sort of Eastern medicine mentality there. But it's also considered a superior adaptogen. We can go to adaptogen science, and what that means helps your kind of system adapt to your stressors in your environment. Then you have something like cordyceps, which is well known and clinically studied for sort of this energy and endurance angle, has to do with the mitochondria and ATP. We can go into that as well. And turkey tail is sort of like this immune boosting generalized mushroom that also is really good for as a prebiotic for gut health.
Yeah.
But each mushroom has their own realm of functionality of what they approach to help optimize the human body. But how do we get the most effect out of these things, right? So if you summed up the clinical research on all of these mushrooms, they're going to be all over the body. But there's themes you can see between each clinical research. So what you notice is you need to take a functional mushroom on a daily basis at a therapeutic level for a very prolonged amount of time. So we can go into some of those data points, but just daily. Yeah. For a very long time at a therapeutic.
What about negative side effects? Now, every time I have massive amounts of stomach problems, but okay, so I research a lot into getting turkey tail and stuff like that because they say it's great for all the stomach problems that I have. But then I hear about all the negative side effects as well. Is that true? Is there really negative side effects, or are people just trying to keep you from taking something that could actually help you?
I think it could be kind of an amalgam of all of these things, right? So why we entered the supplemental mushroom space to begin with was low standards. So unfortunately, we live in an environment, this capitalistic environment. Unfortunately, it breeds individuals that capitalize on the ignorance of their consumer base. So what that means is that they can give you something and tell you what it is, and you need to trust that it's a quality thing. And this even happens with grocery stores. So think of the most healthiest health food store you can. Doesn't matter what it is. There's something that goes on with people that they check their trust at the door, because when they step foot into this grocery store or these grocery stores, they assume that the products on the shelf are quality products.
Right.
That's not the case for mushrooms. It doesn't matter what store, what company. There's going to be this environment that capitalizes on you're not understanding what you're getting. So they're going to sell you an inadequate product. And that inadequate product could be causing the problems at the end of the day. It could be a poor product. It could be many other things that aren't related to the mushroom themselves at the end of the day.
So there really isn't any guidelines to herbals and stuff like that. So what holds you apart from just the random medicine turkey tail mushroom that I want to buy on Amazon?
I think it's our core values and our intentions behind why we do what we do. We want to focus on transparency and education and kind of fill you in on all of these data points of what you don't have to buy our product, but we can teach you how to identify a quality product. So what does some of the language mean when you read a label, how to read a label? So we're very transparent in all of these manners. If you choose our product, great. If you don't, totally fine. We'll help you choose a good product. We're not the only good mushroom company out there, but the amount of good mushroom companies are greatly outweighed by the not good mushroom companies. I would say, I'd venture, this is my experience is that as you're scrolling through your feed and there's new mushroom companies popping up, what you'll notice is that it turns out you can ask 3 questions about any of these mushroom companies, right? Number one, do they grow their own mushrooms? I would say 90 or like a majority, a high percent number of all the mushrooms that are consumed in the US do not originate from the US. They're shipped in unsustainably. That, that's a huge problem. You don't know how it's grown, where it's grown, what it's grown on, what kind of, all of that stuff is unknown. That's a majority of the mushroom companies popping up because they're focused on profits. There's no intention behind creating a high quality therapeutic product. The intention is to make money. And unfortunately that breeds a certain product at the end of the day that's not adequate for people to consume.
By the way, your guys' prices on your website, I do not think is bad. $10 for a tincture is not bad. I think your prices are amazing. So.
Yeah, we wanted to offer products, that are affordable, but also compete with the general market. But at the end of the day, you have to consider the 3 things. So 1, do they grow their own mushrooms? 2, is it fruiting body or mycelium? Are they open about that? Are they honest? And we'll talk about what that means. And then 3, do they do their own extractions? They might not need to do all of those 3 things to be a quality product, but if they do all 3 of those things, you can venture to guess they do have some sort of quality standards in creating a quality product at the end of the day.
Yeah, buying herbal supplements or anything online makes my head explode because reading the back of that, like, well, I don't want that. God knows where they got that from. Like, and then it just, freaks you out a little bit. And you want to buy the right thing, but
100%. And that's where this transparency angle comes into play, because we're beyond vertically integrated, and vertical integration usually goes over the head. And that just means we do everything in house. So from farm to bottle, we control and maintain the quality throughout the process. There's no middle people in our processing. So it goes even beyond that. So Michael and his expertise, I guess it's this side, Michael and his expertise with foraging and identification of wild mushrooms is amazing for us. So he will go out to the wild and he will find us mushrooms on US soil. So he's found us a California lion's mane. He's found us a couple, two or three different turkey tails, one from California, one from Colorado, one from Nebraska. He's gotten us oysters that are locally here. He's gotten us, all of these different mushrooms he's gone out and find, because genetics are a big aspect of mushroom products as well. So when there is a study on lion's mane, for instance, we're so far from what the reality is, because there's not the lion's mane, right? There's not the tomato. There's not the corn. There's different they're called phenotypes. They have different genotypes. They're basically just different expressions that produce different and varying compounds within them. There's not just the lion's mane. There's different phenotypes and different styles of lion's mane you can consume. And we're focused on a lot of this stuff.
So you get them from Michael, you bring them to your farm. You chop those up, make a slurry, and you get your own?
Well, I mean, if we can go into mushroom farming and a 101, it might take about 6 hours. But what's amazing about fungi and why they're mind blowing is they're considered what's called pluripotent. And what pluripotent means is that you can take any cell from the organism in any form and recreate it in any form. So you don't have to start from a seed. Like if we want to use an analogy for planting a plant in a garden, you can plant a seed. You can also plant a clone. So what we're doing is cloning. We're taking a biopsy of the organism, and then we're able to regrow it out in its vegetative state, and then we can fruit it again, and we can continue that process.
It's probably better to take a clone. That way you're guaranteed to get the mushroom.
100%.
For me, I would throw it out there and I would get one.
Yeah.
I mean, never work.
Genetic diversity can be really challenging if you don't know what you're doing. If you're not a breeder, or if you're not understanding how to work with the genetics themselves, it's best to get a clone of something because it's a copy of it. You're guaranteed to get that same entity again by recreating it's the conditions for growing it out.
Yeah. You can even what I really liked doing early on when I first started growing mushrooms was stealing store-bought mushroom and cloning I would just take a little sample of the store mushroom, and then I would go home and put it on a dish and grow it out. It was kind of fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. I never thought about it like that, but yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. If you want to be a mushroom farmer and you learn to proper growing techniques, any genetic is yours, whether it's from the wild, the grocery store, anywhere that you can find a living sample, you can recreate that living sample, given that it can grow in those conditions, right? There are mushrooms that aren't cultivatable in artificial conditions at this point in time, because there are certain mushrooms that we haven't cracked the code on. They're considered mycorrhizal species, is a big term, or they're considered a compound species. There's a lot of complex barriers in the way where you can't currently grow a chanterelle. You can't, I guess morels, the code just did get cracked, but the price is still expensive. But there's many kinds of mushrooms you can grow and many that won't grow in artificial conditions.
So over time, the potency of these mushrooms doesn't dissipate because you didn't get them from the original. You know what I mean? Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. And that's a complex answer at the end of the day, because the question comes into if it's a lab grown species, if it grows in the wild, it has 100% of its growth energy. And then as you grow something, and if it's growing in the wild, it expels some of that energy for protection against microbial attack, from infection, from whatever. It's paying attention to all of these different things. And then that 100% starts going down and down and down. And that percent is then utilized to produce the fruit of the mushroom, which could be used to also produce the medicinal compounds found in the mushroom. Now, if you take that mushroom and grow it in a very clean environment, and it doesn't have to expel that energy to protect itself from pests or pathogens, arguably it can redirect more energy towards yield or towards potency. Unfortunately, though, these things aren't able to be measured for the mushrooms at this point in time. That's a big issue with product quality identification, is the labs aren't caught up to a point where you could say this is a quality mushroom versus this isn't. So you have to really trust, the explanation or the education behind the company you choose to create your product.
Yeah, with a lot of plants, if you stress them out, you get the best result from
wine is like that, especially like wine sometimes grows in the craziest places, like the vineyards, and it stresses them out so hard, but it makes the best juice.
Yes, like you're so right. Especially, I live in Northeast Ohio, so Lake Erie has the best ice wine around because of that. You stress out the grapes, you get the best wine from it. So yeah, that's 100%.
We try not to stress at the farm.
Yeah, too much. But at the end of the day, mushroom farming is hard. Any sort of farming is hard, but mushroom farming it's its own world.
Yeah, it boggles my mind because I've researched a lot about it, but I have yet to successfully grow anything. So,
well, you guys are really fun guys.
Nice.
Now it's supposed to work a little bit with anxiety. How does when I think of mushrooms, I think of nutritional. How does it go to psychological, like with anxiety?
Yeah. So there's, each mushroom has been looked at in certain ways, and I'll go into two mushrooms. So lion's mane and reishi. So when you're talking about this word anxiety, so this anxiety is generally induced by what? Stress. Right. So we all experience stress in our own way. And stress is a vague term on purpose, because your stress is your stress. My stress is my stress. It's all stress, whether it's physical injury, whether it's financial, whether it's moving, getting a new job, getting whatever, or you have a bad diet or lack of sleep, whatever. All this stuff can promote stress. And that stress can also promote anxiety. So one mushroom that comes to mind is reishi. So reishi is considered a superior adaptogen. Right. So this word adaptogen, it's sort of a catch-all term right now. Everyone's using this. Oh, it's an adaptogenic bar. It's whatever. But in the world of science, this world of adaptogen, what it really means to us is that your body, when it's stress induced or anxiety induced or whatever, you have imbalance occur. Yeah. So this imbalance can be, let's say it's hormonal. It's a really big measured thing. So you have cortisol spikes. This is all not great for your day-to-day interactions with your world. Adaptogens are being looked at clinically for helping your body come back to balance, back to homeostasis. So arguably, you're not removing the stressor from your life. That's something else, right? You should always look back what is causing the stress. But if you want a way to better adapt to that stress in your environment, you would consume an adaptogen, because it better regulates hormonal imbalances or whatever imbalance that might be occurring. Adaptogens help you adapt to that environmental stressor.
Was it reishi that was the one that really helped you with your glucose, with your sugar? It can lower your blood sugar.
I think there's quite a few mushrooms that have certain compounds in them that are very beneficial in this way. Honestly, reishi is definitely one of the top mushrooms to be consumed for these reasons. But anxiety is a big one. It can help with better sleep. It can help with calm. Reishi is known as this mushroom that helps with kind of grounding you in some ways, which can be attributed to less anxiety, better sleep, less stress, all that kind of stuff. Reishi is great for these reasons. And then you have mushrooms like lion's mane. You said something that was interesting a minute ago about, I think you mentioned sort of like this psychological sort of effect, right? So when you're talking about lion's mane and this nootropic, so it's just fancy language for neuronal neurite outgrowth or neuronal support. Certain compounds can help upregulate these neuronal formations, which most people think about the brain for neurons, but it turns out your entire body has neurons. They can be damaged, they can be broken, they can be never connected or whatever, but nootropics can help repair damaged neurons and create new neuronal activity all over the body, not just the brain. Turns out when you create more neuronal connectivity in the brain, it can have these sort of outside effects. So they're looking at lion's mane specifically for anxiety, for lessened anxiety, for depressive symptoms, for PTSD. There's a lot of really cool things about lion's mane that's being looked at for those more psychological health reasons.
Wow, that's amazing.
We have a question in the chat, so I'm gonna put a couple questions here and there, and might bounce a little bit because I know Corky. I always got kind of mixed up in the middle there.
Just
but,
call me.
I know she has tons of questions to ask, so I just don't want to get so far behind.
You're good.
Do you see that? Do you see it online?
Yeah.
Question?
So do you have online resources to teach how to grow and how to make the right tinctures? We don't have online classes at this point in time. I would recommend taking a local mushroom cultivation workshop if there is one local to you. So we're here in Colorado. We try to do a monthly hands-on cultivation workshop. Hands-on cultivation workshops are where it's at. But I would recommend we learn best by trying to tackle something on our own and then getting direction after the fact. So if you look online, you will go down a labyrinth of maze enders. There's a lot of dead ends and there's a lot of bad information out there, but it can at least let your brain understand the complexity behind cultivation. And then I would recommend taking some sort of workshop, whether that's online or in person. Again, we only do in person, so reach out to us. We can help you with that. Those are really great ways to learn to cultivate mushrooms. And then just applying yourself, doing it. So trial and error. Fail, right? The high school teacher in me, fail. It's your first attempt in learning something, right? So we fail every day, and it's about this growth mindset, about approaching it, not that don't block yourself from moving forward. Try to figure out how you kind of grow from your mistakes. Then they mentioned tinctures in that as well. No, unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of information on the chemistry of tinctures or creating extracts right now. There's just not a centralized place to kind of learn these things. I'm self-taught in the extraction side. I did work for a couple labs in my past, but I did a lot of reading and research on publications for optimized extractions and the tools and resources you need to do that. But there's a lot of kitchen chemistry guides online that you can find for at-home tincturing. Those are great ways to make your own home brews, if you will. But if you want a really good therapeutic product, I would try to seek out additional educational resources. Again, you can find most of this in research publications. Hopefully someday we'll have some sort of class around how to do your own tinctures.
Cool. Also, there are definitely lots of herb and field guide type books coming out right now that are offering a lot of insights on how to do extractions in your own kitchen chemistry set. And I know some of the newer field guides are coming out with some of those not only culinary and herbal, but medicinal mushroom stuff, which is cool. Nice. I also would recommend where was that question? Where were they? I
don't think it's said.
Okay. Well, I guess, the other bit of advice is, I would say there's almost every state in the union and in Canada has a mycological society, and they're usually really cheap to join. There's no real commitments or anything. And then that for me was the biggest door open for me in this pursuit of understanding how to grow mushrooms, how to find them, how to identify them. It's a wealth of resources controlled by your like neighbors and people in your community. And it's really, I couldn't say enough about the Colorado Mycological Society and how it's like nurtured my development over the years. And I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's like a native plant society. You know, most of the cities or states have a native plant society somewhere lurking in the Facebook pages. CMS.org or cmsweb.org is our like local. But then there's the North American Mycological Society, which is like, I can't remember what it's called. Like Namex or no, that's a company. It's like, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But anyway, those are two good resources.
And thank you, Jane, for posting all those links today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jane. So Terry has questions. Why maple syrup in medicinal drink? I don't know.
Is that
if I could get
to something, or is
I don't know
from our
I'm not
Instagram?
sure
Because I would, my first response would be just because it's delicious. And you know, what is it? The spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Like, I would say like just maple syrup any chance you can, no matter what.
Yeah. Glycerin, if it's a reference to glycerin is not the same thing as maple syrup. Maple syrup, it comes from maple trees. Glycerin is a different compound altogether. It's not a sugar. And just in case that was a reference there. Next question. Can dehydrated mushrooms work for making tinctures later? Yeah, absolutely. That's how you make extracts at the end of the day. There is research that's coming out about fresh mushrooms, but it's very slim and far between. At the end of the day, mushrooms can contain up to 90% water.
What's the temperature on dehydrating mushrooms? Like
low and long.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're looking for therapeutic quality, you want to do low and long. If you can't afford an at-home freeze dryer, which is super, it's not, I wouldn't say it's quality great. It's the best quality for dehydration is a freeze dryer at the end of the day, but it's cost prohibitive and it's not really great for commercial applications because it's limited on space and it takes long run times. Now, if you're like everyone else and you don't have a whole lot of money, a regular dehydrator works great. I would recommend getting one that has the low, like at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit setting. Okay. If it doesn't, that's fine. Just go with the lowest setting you can. What you can even do is unplug the heating aspect of one of these and just let the fan run. And it will be a room temperature dehydration. That's great if you don't have time commitments. If you have time commitments, I would keep it as low as you can afford to keep it for as long as you can keep to get it to crack or dry. That's a way better. That's what, if you're focused on potency, work with dehydrated mushrooms at the end of the day, because if you work with wet mushrooms, you're diluting out your potency by 90% water. So you can't fit as much mushrooms in the extract at the end of the day by 90%. So you get a 90% more potent product with a dehydrated mushroom, 100%. Okay. Can glycerin be made at home?
You could turn you can throw the mushrooms, depending on size. You can also use like a sheet tray and put it on your lowest setting in your oven, and just like leave it overnight.
Okay, because I would be afraid that it would have the temperature too high and then it would.
Well, like less than in your oven, if you can get it less than 100, or at 100, I think that's fine, as long as you make sure you don't like burn the house down.
Yeah. If you're like kitchen chemistry like me and on a budget, a box fan and a screen works great for dehydrating mushrooms.
Oh, okay.
So Mycolove, the name, where did it come from? Is it from because you Colorado and a MyCo and the love, all put together? That's
it. You nailed it. It's sort of like this concept of MyCo being the root of this word mycology, right? And then MyCo as in my Colorado, and then love. So it's this love of all mycology and this thing about everything we love about Colorado. And then CO can be collaboration. It can be cooperative. It can be all of these community. It can be all of these things that you love about what you're doing.
Nice.
So Michael, when the first time you went out and seen a mushroom, what was your thought? Was this poisonous? Should I bring it back? Did you really know it because you've been foraging all your life?
No,
how did you get started?
I went for the first time when I was 29 years old, and I'm turning 45 in a couple months. So it was about 14 years ago. And it was my partner's boss asked me if I wanted to go mushroom hunting, and I had just finished a book by Michael Pollan, which Omnivore's Dilemma, which is like a life-changing book for me. Anyway, he asked me if I wanted to go and mushroom hunt with him sometime, and I for sure was like very interested. I think a few years before I had noticed those people coming into the restaurant, and so I was definitely interested. So he picked me up one day. We drove out to the Platte River. He's a film, like a cinematographer, for commercial cinematography, like business stuff. And so he's really tight with this golf course. And so it was like midweek, and he invited me out there, and we walked into the into the club, and it was like rainy and there's nobody there. And he just basically requests a cart since he's tight with the golf club. And so we jumped in a golf cart and just basically took it into the middle of this golf course along the Platte River. And he had been mushroom hunting there for years. And we sort of, you know how most golf courses have like forests around it.
Yeah.
So we like cut through a bunch of different like areas. And then he's like, I think we'll find something over here. And I'm sort of embellishing a little bit, but when we pulled up like along this little hillside, and he's like, hey, look up there. And I looked up, and for sure, my memory tells me that there was a beam of light, and there was a golden yellow morel mushroom sort of reaching towards the sky. And I remember that vividly. And I had never done it prior to that. I went like animal hunting, like sportsman hunting with my dad growing up, but I never, I did a lot of fishing and that kind of stuff, but I never did any mushroom hunting up until that point. But since then, it's just like, it's a problem.
It'll hook you.
We have a friend in the chat called Rebel Canners, and she's the true rebel.
I've learned a lot from her, but she knows mushrooms too. And
it's just really fun. Every year I try and challenge myself to learn a few more. Some years I just have to relearn what I learned like 3 years in a row, because sometimes it just slips out of my brain. I've thankfully never poisoned myself from eating anything crazy.
That's good.
I've had a lot of really fun times all over the world looking for mushrooms. And I mean, the diversity out there is insane. There's a lot of really cool content creators, especially on Instagram and TikTok, who are like taking you to places like Ecuador, and showing you all of the diversity that's out there. And some of them are like, they glow in the dark. Some of them react to UV light. Some of them are, like, it's just crazy. Some of them are mushrooms that in their original form are sort of edible but not delicious, but then are parasitized by another fungus in the forest and morphs it into a totally different mushroom that is delicious and edible and choice and culinary. And it's like that kind of stuff happening is just wacko to me.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to plug in here too, because we get this question a lot. A lot of people are sort of like, they feel like there's a barrier between them and going out and finding mushrooms because they're worried about poisoning themselves. Well, this is something I'd recommend, just like Myco was saying, 100% join your local chapter for the Mycological Society. There's a lot of really knowledgeable folks in there that will help you identify what's good, what's not. But I think just to kind of set it straight, there are far more poisonous plants out there than there are poisonous mushrooms. Yeah. And out of the millions of species of fungi that can be located on planet Earth, less than 1% have been sort of identified that can kill you. Less than 1%, which is a very small number. It's actually easy. Instead of memorizing all of the local mushrooms that are edible, it's a lot easier to memorize the deadly poisonous ones in your local area. And they can usually fit on one, maybe two hands maximum. And if you can identify those, it's a lot easier for you to identify the edible ones.
Interesting. That's good to know.
And if you're too afraid of it, at the end of the day, grow your own. Just grow mushrooms. It's fun.
That's how I am with my herbs. Like, I don't want to go out looking for them. I'll just grow my own. So that's what I do. And then I have them and I know where they came from.
Now, can you take all the tinctures at one time?
Yeah, absolutely. There hasn't been, I wouldn't say there, so there's no sort of contraindications that have been identified for taking multiple mushrooms at the same time ever. Obviously, if you are on certain medications, you should always check with your physician if it's okay to take a certain mushroom for sure. But at the end of the day, there hasn't been a whole lot of research on when you combine other mushrooms. But this is the way I think about it. So if you took one mushroom, like I would say reishi, it's a compound powerhouse. In a reishi mushroom, you can have up to 400 or 500 unique compounds in one mushroom. That's a big number.
Yeah.
Now, if you just 101 broke these compounds into 2 classes of chemistry, you can get polysaccharides. These are your water soluble. These are your immunomodulators, and they do all sorts of other things. And the other half in reishi, you could call these volatiles, these triterpenoids. These are your alcohol soluble aromatic compounds. Now, if you isolated them separately and you ran clinical research on them independently, they would measure a therapeutic gain independently. When you take them together, you would have a higher therapeutic gain. And it's sort of this gestalt or this synergy between the complexity of these compounds put together, right? So my argument is that when you're adding other mushrooms in here, there's probably great synergy that's occurring that would, probably could potentially get you a higher, return on your investment at the end of the day. Nice. Taking them, the effects that we're talking about are cumulative. They build up over time. So I don't think it, at the end of the day, matters what time of day you take it. If you take it with food or without, I mean, there's probably many questions that aren't answered at this point in time. I think the best way to approach it is just, we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of ritual. When you wake up every morning, you probably have a routine. I would just make a routine out of taking the mushrooms so that you take it daily, whether that's in the morning, at lunch, or in the evening, doesn't matter. Probably there's no data to say otherwise, as long as it gets into your system on a daily basis.
Okay.
That was a funny comment by Gare. Put some laughter in there.
What's TP? I need. Never mind.
What?
I just was egging him on.
Oh my gosh.
It just reminds me of Beavis and Butthead, that's all.
Yeah.
I use mullein when I'm out in the woods.
Nice. Not pine cones?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. You get all organic on us.
Uh-huh. That's after I swim in the mud.
Wow.
You guys are going to make me cry now. Now, if you take a droplet and put it on your tongue, that's really, really potent, right? So what would you do? Like, how would you go about it?
Yeah. So again, getting it into your system, right? So with functional mushrooms, you can put them under your tongue, but it honestly can just go into the gut. So if you just need to get these into your gut, I recommend adding it to any sort of beverage, because you drink liquids on a daily basis. If you just add it to your liquid, you can just drink it down. It's that simple.
It disappears, like it just disappears in the drink, and then it's just, you go about your day. I like the idea of like putting it in oatmeal, especially the glycerin ones, because it's sort of on the sweeter side. That's something I've thought about before. And for that person who is it you that asked that question, Joe? The other thing I would tell people is to go to our Instagram page. Victoria, who runs our social media, has like a lot of our reels, and a lot of our stuff is about like, how can you incorporate this into your daily routine, your ritual, and so there's a lot of resources in there. She's created a lot of cool content around, slipping it in your matcha every morning, or, putting it in your wine,
Love the pictures here. Look at this one.
Yeah. Some lion's mane for you.
Oh, wow.
So this is on Instagram, guys, if you want to go check that out.
Thank you for showing that. Yeah. See, she's boozing it up midday.
Oh, that's what I'm going to have to do, Joe.
Right before our meeting, I bet.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah, this is great. This is a really cool website. What's going on there?
Cordyceps. It's the love mushroom. It's for energy, endurance, and stamina.
Yeah, it helps with, it's a vasodilator. It can help with oxygen intake. There's a lot of clinical research that's been measured on it. And arguably what it really does is really enhance the metabolic processes. And hopefully I'm a nerd. I'll accept that. Maybe there's another nerd listening to this, but if you answer this, you are a nerd. That's totally fine. We all memorized this in science class, if we were paying attention, that the mitochondria is...
Nobody was paying attention, Shane. You're the only nerd on this.
It's okay.
the powerhouse of the cell. And basically the mitochondria is in every cell of your body, and it's the energy producer in your body. Basically, mitochondria is essential for you to survive. You wouldn't survive without this, right? So the mitochondria uses energy currency, and it's known as ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. That's not that important, but the adenosine aspect is. So when you have this adenosine in your system through your diet, it'll enhance your metabolic process, which can be better endurance, better energy, that kind of stuff. Cordyceps has a compound in it called cordycepin. And if you were to pause this, if you're watching it after live or whatever, and you Google the molecular structure of adenosine, and then you did the same thing for cordycepin, you would see that they're basically virtually indistinguishable. Well, they're indistinguishable by the body. So when you take this mushroom, it's using it as a adenosine for ATP synthase. Anyway, it's creating more metabolic energy. So all that really means is I hike, I bike, I run. I'm an endurance on my feet kind of person all day long, and I get winded throughout my day. Just it's pretty normal. I get winded. But if you take something like cordyceps and at the powerhouse, thank you, powerhouse of the cell. See, I told you, someone's thank you, Rebel Canners. Thank you. I'm not the only nerd here. There's two of us now. Welcome to the table. As I push up my glasses, I'm not a nerd. But basically, it can move the wind wall for you. If you have more of this compound in your system, it gives you more metabolic output. And it can also enhance oxygen intake. It's called VO2 max. Anyway, it's a really amazing mushroom when it comes to natural energy and natural endurance. But
is it better than like drinking some caffeine? Like you could just take that instead of taking caffeine. Like in the middle of the day, like I need something. I can't drink coffee, so I'm like always needing something.
Yeah.
So could I take that? And it was like,
I would say the difference being like, I can't speak on a chemistry level, but my guess is that caffeine is a stimulant, like it's a drug. Whereas cordyceps is more of that, like over time, you're expanding that wind wall, you're getting more stamina. But I will say this, I have experienced a jolt of energy prior to running if I've just like upped a little bit more cordyceps, and I'm not sure if that's placebo or not, but I for sure have experienced that. But not like a jittery caffeine type.
I would think more of like endogenous versus exogenous. So what that really means is that you have a natural way of doing this in your own system. And then you have an external way of doing this, right? Caffeine is an external chemical that you would take that kind of squeezes your adrenals and drains that system. Whereas when you take cordyceps and cordycepin, it's basically acting like an already organic substance that your body already generates and understands. So you're getting a more natural energy without draining your adrenal system like you would caffeine. And it's, caffeine can be psychologically and physically addicting, right? So cordycepin is not, as far as any research has ever come out, because adenosine isn't addictive, right? It's an amino acid that you get from your diet that's generated in your body naturally. So it's more of a natural endurance generator that your body already knows what to do with.
Okay.
Wanda, you're safe. We haven't put any funny mushrooms in there yet. So you're good.
Yeah. So the mushrooms, again, that we work on are functional mushrooms. They are classified as medicinal because they have a functional medicinal aspect. But the mushrooms that Mycolove works with currently are non-psychedelic mushrooms. So we do not grow our products do not contain any illegal substances on planet Earth. Now, if you go to Mars, it might be a little different. But on the entire planet Earth, nothing that we produce would be illegal, would be considered to come up on a drug test, would do anything of the sort.
Wanda, that was a really good question. It was funny, but it was a really good question because a lot of people don't know the difference. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
that was a really good
Whenever, so we were speaking to earlier, like why we formed this company, and sort of one of our missions is to like educate, right? Because still, like, while all of us on this call know a little bit about mushrooms, we still know like less than 99% of what there is to know about it. And outside of this conversation, the odds are even worse, right? So
Yeah.
most people will come to me, and when they ask me what I do for a living, and the first immediate thing they will say, "Ooh, the funny ones," like, because that's where everyone's head is at.
Yeah.
And so that is a fair question, Wanda, but you are in the safe zone. Nothing, like Shane said, on this planet is illegal in our products, according to the U.S. federal government.
Will they eventually make psychedelics legal for people that need them, like people that have
Most
PTSD
definitely.
and stuff like that?
Yeah, most definitely. There's already states moving in that direction. I know California just shut something down recently, as far as a initiative in the a ballot initiative. They just recently shut something down, but both Colorado and Oregon are moving in that direction. And without question, there are like organizations like Johns Hopkins doing research on PTSD and veterans and all sorts of like ketamine treatments and
if
others.
it can help people, I'm all for it.
That's
so
no
cool.
doubt. Nobody's being harmed, and it's not.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that people don't understand about magic mushrooms, for example. You could do magic mushrooms one time and never want to do them ever again, right? Like there's nothing addictive about them. And
They're considered anti-addictive.
Yeah, exactly. Like you never want to see another one for like months after doing it. It's just so intense sometimes. So it's a totally different class of drugs, in my opinion, than what people see on TV.
I'll go into a little bit of a rant here and answer Sheena Sales Thrifty Treasures question about it being legal in Colorado. Short answer, no. There's a longer answer there, but psilocybin, when we're talking about this word magic mushrooms, we're talking about psilocybin. It's psilocybin and psilocin. They're called tryptamines. There's many other of these psychedelics found in mushrooms as well. We're still learning about this in general. But the interesting thing about psilocybin is that if you Googled the molecular structure of psilocybin, go ahead and Google the molecular structure of serotonin. They are very similar structures. So your body, there was a paper published a few years ago talking about the safety of consuming certain compounds, and your body knows more. It's safer to consume. It all depends on dosages, right? So you could obviously go off the rails with this and cause issues, but in a general setting, the dosages of psilocybin that you would consume ever are safer to consume than a cup of coffee at the end of the day, because it's so closely related to the other compounds that your body already knows what to do with and already produce, right? So psilocybin is a very interesting compound that's really, it's naturally occurring and your body knows exactly sort of what to do with it, which is really cool. So is it legal, right? So currently it's federally illegal all over the country, federally illegal. So then you have states which have their own sort of legal, or sort of criminal pathways of what they determine what's legal and what's not. And sometimes they don't always match up with federal. So currently federally, psilocybin is illegal, right? But statewide, Oregon is on the way to work towards, they decriminalized, right? And they are currently working in the realm of therapeutic dosages and working through a therapeutic process with psychedelics like psilocybin mushrooms. It's a whole world. Colorado, hopefully will have some sort of therapeutic legal pathway in the future. Currently, it is only considered decriminalized. So decriminalized does not equal legalize. It's different. It's a gray
means
zone.
that if I'm driving down the street and I'm driving drunk and a cop pulled me over and I had a big bag of mushrooms in the back of my truck, he or she has the discretion whether or not they want to take me to court for the drugs, right? So it's not like a requirement that they press charges because they found drugs. And additionally, from what I understand, in Colorado, it's illegal based on the Colorado law once it is in full effect after last year's election or 2 years ago, ballot. But in order for it to be legal, I think you have to give the mushroom.
Yeah.
You cannot sell it. You cannot profit from selling it.
Okay.
So there's a whole muddy, murky looking framework ahead of us. But yeah, that was a great point you made, Shane. Like, it doesn't mean legal. It just means decriminalized. It means it's not on the cops' radar to really look for it or to like punish you for it. Obviously, if you're driving, on I-80 across Nebraska, state border, and you've got, 1,500 pounds of psilocybin and you're still in Colorado, I bet you that they would have some issues with that.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject because right now in the decrim phase, which is kind of the limbo before there's some sort of therapeutic legal pathway, we're not at the therapeutic legal pathway yet. So currently it's considered the GGG model, 3Gs, which is the gift, gather, grow model, which means you can gift it, you could gather it, and you can grow it for personal uses only. Now, when you start going above and beyond personal use into distribution territory, that's where it becomes a problem. So if you have a personal amount of mushrooms on you in Colorado, you can't be prosecuted necessarily because there's no money that can be used to prosecute you. But if you are belligerent and causing an issue, they can use it as an aid to bring you in and charge you for these other things on top, without charging you for psilocybin mushrooms for personal use, at least.
Is there a mushroom capital in the world? Like the place with the most mushrooms?
Well, I mean, so I'll answer and I'll let Michael answer. I haven't asked him this. So I have two answers. One is more scientific. The other one is personal. Personally, I would say the mushroom capital of the world is the Pacific Northwest. That's just because that's where I learned to grow mushrooms and I became fascinated by mushrooms. It's just, again, personal. Scientifically, I would say there is a research publication that came out about temperate zones, but generally the most biodiverse region in the world is the equatorial region. So anywhere like in Costa Rica or in that realm of South America, I would say you probably have your highest biodiversity capital of technical biodiversity of mushrooms. But again, I don't know if that's been answered necessarily.
Yeah, it makes sense. It has like the right breeding grounds for
humidity is a big part of it. So the Pacific Northwest, what you'll notice is the more diversity and prevalence and abundance is generally related to the amount of humidity in the atmosphere. So if you're going to a temperate rainforest, you're going to have a far more amount of mushrooms than you would in a high desert plain like Colorado. We have far less prevalence, abundance, and diversity of mushrooms, I would say, than more wet regions of the world. Michael, where do you think? Yeah,
I would probably echo. I would definitely think. I think Costa Rica probably has the most diversity in the world, probably, from what I've read or heard. Where's like the place to go for mushrooms? So, like I said at the beginning, I'm more of a belly hunter. I'm like a culinary guy. So if I'm a mushroom guy, I'm going to Europe. I'm going to go to like Italy or France or Sweden, or even like Switzerland. There's a reverence, and we sort of touched on this earlier, where like most mushrooms are not poisonous in the West for whatever reason. In the States, my mom told me, don't touch that mushroom in the yard when I was growing up. There's a phobia around it. But in the East, or I would say in Europe and in Asia, also Asia, there's a reverence and a sort of communities that are built around that. And like people who I meet in the Colorado Mycological Society, a lot of them are from Asia and a lot of them are from Eastern Europe. And they describe their times growing up of, we would go out with my grandma and like we would spend weekends foraging for mushrooms. But for me personally, I would say Italy for truffles and porcini. Those would be the places I would want to be at some point, checking that out, because of not only just like the reverence and the adoration for the mushrooms, but like the other side of that, which is like how much they love to eat and cook with them. And to me, like that's where I
wonder, does that make them healthier? It makes me wonder now.
Oh, like
because usually like
Italy and
diet, places,
Yeah, like I said earlier, they call meta-analyses. So a meta-analysis is basically looking at all of the publication and then analyzing it and finding patterns in that. So what they've done, which is really cool, is recently they've done a meta-analysis on all the publications on all mushrooms and the benefits that mushrooms have. And they asked a very simple question. They said it doesn't matter what kind of mushroom. They just said, did they eat mushrooms on a regular basis? So a couple times a week, and for a prolonged amount of time. And what they found is that for all cause morbidity causes, so the sedentary lifestyle is like high on morbidity because you're not active, you're not doing things. That's another side of this, but just consuming mushrooms a couple times a week on a regular basis for a long amount of time showed just tremendous low causes of morbidity and obesity, for cognitive performance, cognitive decline, for cancer. The list goes on. All of the issues that we're seeing from chronic illness, whatever that chronic illness is, stress, whatever. They find that just by consuming mushrooms, that's very vague. So just by getting a mushroom in your diet a couple times a week, you have just higher probability of avoiding some of these dangers in everyday life at the end of the day. So yes, I would argue to say that these communities that don't have this mycophobia, that are integrated and interwoven into this communal kind of knowledge around consuming mushrooms just by grabbing them from the grocery store or wild foraging them and just eating them in general, are probably way healthier than individuals that don't eat mushrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's almost like no fat, and it's a lot of protein, a lot of good healthy stuff going on in a lot of these mushrooms. I wanted to say two things. One thing was about this study, or I can't remember if it was a study or if it was anecdotal, but I just remember maybe it was in Paul Stamets' Mycelium Running, but a story about how there was this community in Japan that had remarkably lower rates of cancer relative to everyone surrounding them. And it turns out that it was a giant shiitake mushroom community, farming community. And so they speculate that it was because of all of these farmers would take home some of their crops and eat them on the regular basis, that their community was healthier and had less instances of cancer, or lower rates, I should say. That was one thing I thought was really interesting. And then the last thing, again, to just touch on the Europe thing, is in places like Switzerland, the pharmacies, and in France, I think, the pharmacies, like the local pharmacies, that's, if you're unsure about your mushroom that you harvested on the mountain that day, you can literally go into the local pharmacies and these guys will tell you whether it's poisonous or not. Like, it's awesome. Like, could you imagine going into like a CVS in like downtown Denver with a bag of wild foraged mushrooms and being like, hey, bro, can you help me out here? We're so far from that,
How about mushrooms and COVID? Because nobody ever wants to talk about COVID, because whatever. Yeah. Is there any kind of, with COVID, if you got COVID or you want to prevent COVID, is there any kind of mushrooms or things we could take to help us?
Yeah, I mean, again, just getting mushrooms in your diet is a great start, because if we're talking about your immune system and your immune system to protect itself in general, as a preventative maintenance, there is tons of research, clinical research on many mushrooms, on just consuming. But if consuming them is one part, but getting a high quality therapeutic product in your life, I think, is another level of this. But there's tons of good research and data on just consuming functional mushrooms on a regular basis and having this idea of this immunomodulatory effect, right? So this idea that it can boost your immune system, whether it's overactive or underactive, and balance it out to where it needs to be to protect itself by producing cytokines, NK cells, macrophages, T cell, etc. Like it's cascading. Like, you get these mushrooms in your diet. They have these polysaccharides called beta glucans, and these beta glucans are immunomodulators, which help boost in that immune protection. There has been some research there are research publications that are in process of writing that I'm aware of that have looked at mushrooms like cordyceps. And preventative as well as treatment for COVID type symptoms. I'm not positive on the results. I can't speak to that at all. But I would say that getting any sort of therapeutic product in your diet, it's not going to hurt. I would say your chances of having a better kind of ability to not only protect yourself, but rebound or lessen the impact of in general.
And I want to just add to that. And so, like, taking our product in a vacuum or taking a mushroom product in a vacuum is not the sole answer to surviving a COVID attack or any sort of other health related issue. Like, we want to take our mushrooms in conjunction with walking every day,
Diet and
good
exercise.
food, diet, exercise,
Yeah.
sitting on a cushion and being intentional. Like, all of these things have that same cascading effect that Shane's talking about within the mushrooms. And arguably anyone who is already turned on to mushroom supplements and who is already like tuned in and like taking that route or eating in that way, chances are they're already on a good path to begin with, right? And they've been like minding their body and their mind, you know.
And if you've had an experience, and people talk a bit about long COVID or like the afterglow or after effect of having this infection that really bogs them down and lessens their energy levels, I think mushrooms like cordyceps and lion's mane, not only like reishi is like, I think of reishi as my preventative type mushroom. I mean, they're all preventative type mushrooms at the end of the day, but reishi seems to me to be like one of the more potent versions of this. But for the, being tired and lethargic and not having the energy or the mental capability or the brain fog, right? We're talking about lion's mane, cordyceps, I think are great mushrooms for that. And then reishi and turkey tail as your preventative are really great options.
Now, I don't know if you can answer this or not. So if you can't, that's okay. But what about these and kids? Like, okay, the reason why I'm saying this is because every year my son goes to school, he comes home, he gets everyone sick in the house because he goes home, goes to school, he collects whatever, and then brings it home. So
what's his name?
My son?
Yeah.
Fred.
Brett?
Fred.
Fred. Well, I would just tell Fred to not come home anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, he's 5, so that'd be kind of hard. But
yeah,
but
I get that. Yeah, I get that. I think
twice in a row, like he puts his hands on everything. I'm like, I gotta like find
that
something.
Seems like a problem.
No, I want to be careful here too, because again, functional mushrooms are not panacea, right? So having no effect is, I would say, as good as lessened impact, right? So if we can lessen the impact of that occurrence or lessen the severity of that impact, I think that's where we need to focus on mushrooms. I think they can at least have that, because again, what Michael was saying is these cofactors of exercise, diet, sleep, anxiety, or stress. I think all of these can overwhelm anyone's body and lower the immune system in general. So it's difficult to say that mushrooms are the answer. I think it's a combination of all these things, right? So for kids, unfortunately, there aren't any sort of clinical research trials on children that really are done, because it's really hard to test children as a population. So we can't speak onto that necessarily. But I do, what's interesting is if you were to check with your child's doctor and ask if that child could take mushroom supplements, or if you talk to your doctor and ask them if you could take supplements, more often than not, they're going to say no, mainly because there's a lack of knowledge around that base. And I found this out.
Frustrating.
Yeah. And I found this out in a personal situation where I was asking a doctor if my partner could take my mushroom extracts that I've been making. And they basically said, based on my based on the requirements of what I do, I have to say no, because I don't have an in-depth understanding of what these mushrooms can do and what they're well known for. So I have to defer to no because of my lack of understanding. And then she went on to say, I would defer to you. You have more of an understanding of this topic than I do. So do you think it's good? And I was like, okay, you're going to defer to me? I think that's an issue. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be had and gained in the education of doctors, or even just some resources to help these physicians make more educated decisions rather than deferring to no because of a lack of understanding.
Right.
Well, there's also
a lot of doctors are just going to be like, well, that's an herbal supplement, I'm just going to say no, because most doctors are just going to shoot that down.
Yeah. There's also a lack of understanding with the soil, because it only goes so far. Like Elaine Ingram talked about the soil, and she's the queen of compost, for example. And she only went so far. I'm studying this right now, so that's the reason why.
Yeah, the soil food web. It's a very potent, powerful thing. And talking about how these things grow, the soil is basically the immune system or the stomach of that plant. So the food that you put in that, or the compost that you use, needs to be well balanced so that the innate immune system or the SAR of the plant can be activated accurately. So there is complexities in all of this for sure, and there's a big lack of understanding in all of this. Right. Yep. So I think, these are all really good topics.
So
I know, Dr. Paula, I wasn't talking about you. You're a wonderful doctor. I wasn't talking about you.
Into the sore muscles. Absolutely. So if you look into something called triterpenoids, I think you're going to be, it's going to be amazing for you. So mushrooms, a lot of the mushrooms have these terpene backboned compounds. So whether they're terpenes, diterpenes, or triterpenes, the chemical names don't matter necessarily, but there's these things that are terpene backbones or triterpenoids that have been looked at for sore muscles, inflammation, and the ability to repair themselves over time. There's really good data on that stuff for sure. Reishi is considered to have many of these compounds in them.
How about getting blood sugar under control?
Yes, I think there is a lot of good data on this as well. I unfortunately can't speak to the clinical research because I'm one person, Michael's one person. There are millions of questions and medical questions that we can only cover so many. Blood sugar is just not one that I've specifically looked into, but what I would recommend for anybody that has very specific questions, we get thousands of emails, right? And they're basically, I have condition X or I have issue X. And can mushrooms help me? And what's really interesting is out of all of these emails, the ages can range between 18 and 118. Doesn't really matter, but the theme is there. It says, hey, Western medicine has failed me. How can mushrooms help me? Which mushroom can help X or whatever? I recommend the easiest way is to do a general internet search for your specific condition and mushrooms, plus mushrooms. And you could be more specific. You could look at the mushrooms we have, right? You can say, condition X plus lion's mane, search it. And you'll see very quickly if this is a topic that has been covered or has not been covered. Unfortunately, there is a lot of good information, but again, there's a lot of unknowns because there's an infinite amount of unknowns at this point. And we're just trying to tackle these unknowns one by one.
There's a great book available. It's been around for a long time by an herbalist and friend named Robert Rogers. He is in Calgary, and it's The Fungal Pharmacy is the name of the book. And he talks about a lot of the sort of like the chemistry within the mushrooms in each one. And like Shane mentioned, these polysaccharides, and he'll cover a lot of that. But also, I think he lists out conditions. Since he's an herbalist, he sort of like kind of goes through the book, and I think he has a new book out with more research attached to it, which is exciting. But Robert Rogers is the guy I would look to for any sort of like
specific.
Yeah, he's like it's a pretty broad sweeping book.
It's a reference text. It's got over 1,200 citations.
Yeah, it's okay. Big, but it's a great resource. And I bet you anything you could find it at the library. If you don't want to buy it, but it's definitely a resource worth having if this is a subject that's interesting to you.
So guys, Corky's going to ask another question or two, and because it's already 8:30, well, time's up.
No
And
worries.
then after Corky, we're going to just check out your webpage, and then we're going to end the night. So
I don't have any more questions right now at the top of my head. So
I kind of
spot there, Joe.
Yeah, no worries. I think if anybody took anything away from this, is that there is a wealth of knowledge to be gained, a lot of health challenges to be tackled, and there's a lot of hope of taking this concept of your health into your own hands and in kind of working on yourselves with the tools that we have naturally occurring all around us. And then I hope that you do a little bit of due diligence and just look into these companies because, again, you can choose us. You don't have to. It doesn't matter. But just educating yourself around the vocabulary of a quality product. And that's, again, I'll just remind people you should be able to ask these 3 questions. Does that company, how do they source their mushrooms? Do they grow them preferably? Do they do their own extractions, or do they even extract them? That's also really important. It needs to be extracted. And are they honest about what's in it? Are they using the actual part of the organism you want, namely the fruiting body, or are they using what's called mycelium, which is like using the bark of an apple tree and calling it apples? So again, there's a lot of education to be had. If you have any questions at all in general, feel free to shoot us an email, team, TEAM, @mycolove.farm. It's our general email inbox, and I'd love to be able to answer your questions.
Yep, just go ahead and put Shane in the subject headline so he gets that one. And then also, if you guys are, any of you who watched or listened to this over the course of the last hour and a half and heard us talking about psychedelics and serotonin and all of that, there's another great reference book that I would put out there, and sort of a anthropological evolutionary theory called The Stoned Ape Theory, coming from a book called Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. It's a really fascinating subject. It's a quick read. It's right in line with anybody who's interested in this new movement of psychedelics, and like, well, why does it work, and how did we discover? Like, it's a great read. So,
okay. Guys, just one more thing on your page here for Mycolove Farms. Anything you want everybody to see that's important here that they should take a look at?
Yeah, we obviously we have our offerings. Don't be too lost in what we're offering. It's really simple. We offer 4 mushroom options, but we offer 2 versions. One is an alcohol, one is a non-alcohol, and there's links to either one. You can get individual, and there's bullet points on each page to educate yourself, or you can get sets. So if you're like, I want all of this, you can easily get a 4-set option. You save a bit of money by bundling there. We also offer, no requirement subscriptions, no cancellation fee, anything like that, no contracts or anything like that. So if you want this in your life on a regular basis to get the best bang for your buck, I'd recommend getting a subscription option. It's free shipping. It's direct to your door every 4 weeks. It's just kind of auto set up for you. And it gets you the best discount possible. And then definitely check out the blog section. There's a couple of blogs up there that sort of talk along the lines of what we're talking about here. And we try to update that on a regular basis as well.
Awesome,
Very
guys.
awesome.
And there's your cultivation workshops.
Yeah. So if you are local, again, we don't do this online at this point in time. If you're a local here in Colorado and you want a hands-on crash course akin to drinking water from a fire hydrant, join me for a 6-hour endeavor, or 6 to 8 hour endeavor, and how to grow mushrooms from start to finish. I'd love to have you in one of my classes. We try to do it on a monthly basis. Just email me. Once I get enough emails, I'll go ahead and put on a cultivation workshop. Michael joins me for those as well. And yeah, so just to answer this quick question, what is the difference between alcohol versus the other? One has alcohol, the other does not. It's that simple. It's the same product, just different carrier agent, if you will. Alcohol is in one, whereas glycerin is in the other. If you want to learn more about non-alcohol, the glycerin, just Google glycerin. It's a plant-powered resource. It's a really amazing shelf stability agent. It doesn't have alcohol. That's all really the difference is. How do I become a wholesaler? Email me directly at shane@mycolove.farm. I handle all the wholesale accounts. I'd love to start a conversation with you. We also private label. So if you're a person out there that wants to start your own mushroom company and you want quality extracts and you want product formulation ideas, product formulation overall, whatever, we made a decision early on that we don't care if it has our label or not. It can have our product with your label, a custom extraction, whatever. Being a vertically integrated mushroom company means we can grow any mushroom that's cultivatable, and we can extract it however you want based on your budget. So if you want to wholesale our product, great. That's our branded product. Easy. Just hit me up. We'll hook you up with some product. If you want to do your own private label or custom product as well, hit me up with that. And we'd love to help formulate your product specifically.
Guys, thank you guys so much. That was so informative. This is an excellent interview.
Yeah,
You're going to get a lot of people to watch this because it's so informative. It's right to the point. I really enjoyed this, and thank you guys for taking your time today and your busy schedule to do this interview.
Was a long time to be on too. So
Well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
You guys have great energy, and it's clear that you enjoy what you're doing. So we loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone. Everybody have a good night. Thank you guys
Okay, you
so
too.
much.